Welcome to the Inside EcoDevo podcast, where we highlight economic development happening in the state of Missouri. I'm your host, Eric Thurman, with the Missouri Department of Economic Development. And on this episode, we're talking about the Missouri Comprehensive Economic Development Strategy, also known as CEDS. And sitting down with me in the studio is Paul Eisenstein, Senior Director of Operations for DED, and Danielle Briot, Deputy Director of DED's Strategy and Performance Division. Guys, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Eric.
Thank you.
Yeah, that was quite an intro. It was a big mouthful, but we're talking about CEDS, and we'll just jump right into it. Other than what the title suggests to us, that it's comprehensive and it's an economic development strategy, what is CEDS?
Yeah, so you nailed the name, Eric, Comprehensive Economic Development Strategy. But by design, it's a document that consists of a summary of a background of the economic conditions in the state, a SWOT analysis, strategic directions or action plans, and an evaluation framework to measure implementation and performance of the plan.
Okay. In layman's terms, since I'm sure maybe listeners don't know what a SWOT is and all the stuff, in layman's terms, what does all that mean?
Really, it's just taking a deep dive of what our state has to offer, what are our strengths, what are our weaknesses, where might we have opportunities to dig in and do more to help advance our economy and really bolster opportunities within all parts of our state.
I'm guessing what you just said there is going to be the answer to my follow-up question to that, but I'll ask it anyway. Why is it important to have a CEDS plan, to develop one, to have one? I'm guessing pretty similar around with what you were just saying there, but maybe there's a little bit more.
Yeah, I think there's a little bit more. A CEDS plan is really just a strategic plan. So broadly, that will help us align our efforts and resources so we can reach our goals. But conceptually, what a CEDS will do is it'll act as a mechanism that solicits engagement of diverse populations and increased collaboration across the sectors and communities within our state. And that can help lead to enhancing our state's economy and prosperity for all Missourians. And, across our state, each of our regions have many strengths and assets and great ideas. And so our statewide CEDS, we're being very intentional that our strategy is built on a foundation that's going to align and support those local goals as we look to move Missouri forward.
And how do we get to that point of knowing what the strategy is, knowing what the goals are, knowing what direction we should point our CEDS in? Like, how do we even determine any of that?
It comes into how we've looked at developing our CEDS plan. And, we have a kind of a three-pronged approach to developing what that looks like. And the three main areas in the development will be centered around collecting data and research, really engaging with our stakeholders across the state, and then using that research and stakeholder feedback to develop our strategic options. So it's really based on what their feedback is, what they are informing on how we should look to develop this moving forward. That's a big part of it. And the work that's going into this is going to take us well over a year to finish and finalize, because we are being very intentional to make sure that we are taking into consideration what our stakeholders think needs to go into this plan.
And Eric, if I can just jump in just to, add on to what Danielle's saying, I think it's really important that we always start with, why are we doing this in the first place? And there's really three primary reasons why it's even worth updating our statewide CEDS. So first of all, we want to make sure that every Missouri community can have access to federal funding streams for many years to come. So that's number one. Number two, we want to improve our programs and policy areas. And number three, we want to make sure we bring forward bold economic development ideas. So through the process that Danielle just outlined, we just want to make sure we achieve those three goals.
Okay. And you're saying updating the CEDS, I'm assuming we've always had one. I'm only asking that, I've been with the department for about 5 years now. And if we've always had one, I'm only hearing about it recently. So two-pronged question, have we always had one, and why now is it being highly talked about?
Yeah, I'll jump into that question. No, we have not always had one. And so the Comprehensive Economic Development Strategy, or CEDS, is really an EDA construct. So EDA is the Economic Development Administration at the federal level. And it's typically regions have a regional CEDS. So what are the assets? What are they trying to achieve as a region? But a lot of states do have a statewide CEDS as well. So we haven't updated our statewide economic development strategy in Missouri since 2011. So I think we all know a lot has changed since 2011. We want to take the opportunity now to update our statewide CEDS.
From like a federal state requirement level, I mean, do we have to have a CEDS? Like, if we have one, what is the plus minus of having one versus not.
So we do not have to have a statewide CEDS. We think this is an opportunity. We received some funding from EDA to update our CEDS, so we decided to go for it. Now, regional planning commissions, they do, in order to apply for federal funding streams, they often have to have a regional CEDS. But we think there's just an opportunity, again, going back to those three goals of making sure local communities can access federal funding streams, improving our programs and policies, and bringing forward bold economic development ideas. We think the statewide CEDS is a great way to do that. So we don't have to do that, but we know that when our federal partners have grant opportunities for our regional entities around the state, if there is alignment of that local entity with our statewide CEDS, we know that our federal partners, such as EDA, will say, hey, this local effort is aligned with the statewide strategy, and we know that they're more likely to fund that project if they feel like there's alignment.
So, and I could be wrong here, maybe I'm distilling it down a little bit too simply, so correct me if I'm wrong, but the CEDS can almost act as like telling the federal governments to be of giving out funds and whatnot. Like, here's our plan. People are going to follow this plan. So the federal government can go, okay, yeah, we like your plan. It seems good. We feel confident that the money is going to be used in an equitable manner. We're fine giving you X amount of dollars because the CEDS is what we're following, if that makes sense.
I think a lot of times at the federal level, they'll just want to see coordination. So oftentimes these, economies are regional in nature. So it's normally the regional partners who are bringing forward, hey, we want to develop this infrastructure, or this industry, or this aspect of economic development in our local or regional area. So what the federal partners want to know is, like, is this just a one-off that's just like once they get this funding, they complete the project, is it done? Or is it aligned with a larger strategy? What our federal partners have told us is if you update your statewide CEDS, that's going to look good for any of those local partners who are applying for those funds, knowing that it's not just a one-off, but it's part of an overall aligned, integrated strategy.
As I am aware, this is somewhat tied into the statewide planning grant. How does that factor into this?
Yeah, so we did receive a statewide planning grant from the Economic Development Administration, or EDA. We received that a couple years ago, and that was through ARPA, or the American Rescue Plan Act. And so that's the funding we're using to update our CEDS.
Okay. But with this grant money, what exactly are we using that for specifically when it comes to making a CEDS?
A lot of it's research. So we've partnered with our regional planning commissions. So there's 19 regional planning commissions around the state. So we've partnered with them to look at their regional strategies. And we're trying to find common threads, common sort of assets, common strengths, and common challenges. And what does that mean for our statewide strategy? So we're using some funding to work with our regional planning commission partners. We've also conducted an industry cluster assessment, and then also we're conducting an industry skills assessment. So a lot of research. And then we're also using that funding for some stakeholder engagement efforts with economic development professionals and leaders across the state.
I would imagine that a lot of that research is still going on, but what research has taken place already? What have you guys discovered?
We started out with researching over 20 of Missouri's top industry clusters to get a sense of industry areas that we have strong potential to grow or strengthen. And that was no small feat, as you can imagine. And it's no secret that Missouri is one of the top states with the largest diversity of industry. So with the help of the Center for Regional Economic Competitiveness, or CREC, we were able to select 5 of those industry clusters to undergo further analysis and stakeholder engagement, just to see if there's opportunity to align future strategies around those clusters. I don't want to spoil the details of that, and folks want to learn more about those industry clusters, then encourage them to listen into the next CEDS podcast.
Yes, we will be covering that information in depth in an upcoming episode. Besides the industry clusters, that seems like that was probably the focus. What other kind of data is being used to drive our strategy?
Yeah, so the industry clusters are actually just one piece of the overall data and research that's going into the CEDS development. We are also looking at peer state comparison research that was conducted last year. We are looking at those regional CEDS and doing some analysis on those to better understand what those local priorities are. The skills assessment that's currently in the works to understand more information and data around occupations and opportunities that we have to develop those important pipelines for the industries in Missouri. And then our working teams. Our working teams are currently doing a lot of research with their working team members on kind of actually digging through some of that data and information and really kind of coming up with ideas on how they think we can focus our efforts in other areas that maybe we haven't looked into research on yet or data on yet, but other aspects that might be important for us to use and incorporate into our overall planning.
Eric, if I can just add on to what Danielle is saying, what we wanted to do with this research is there's so much already out there. And so we didn't want to, with the statewide CEDS, say, we're going to create a new strategy from scratch. There's already a lot out there. There's a lot of research. There's a lot of insights. So we wanted to start off like, let's pull what's already out there and understand that first. So that's what you're seeing out of this first research phase.
Anything out of that is shareable, that is enlightening towards where we should be going, or versus our peer states? Since we looked at that, what is the data telling you? What is some things there that you can share?
Yeah, we did do a peer state comparison, just looking at all of the different economic development programs that Missouri has compared to our peer states. I think there's a lot of interesting information in that in terms of like various incentive programs, which states are more focused on site development or infrastructure development, workforce development, that sort of thing. I'll also say we've done a lot of economic research, and our economist, Jeff Pinkerton, does a great job with this. And so one thing that's been just fantastic is our manufacturing growth since the start of the pandemic has been phenomenal. We rank number one amongst our Midwestern peer states. That includes all of our, the typical Midwest states like Ohio, Indiana, Michigan, but also our contiguous states like Arkansas, Oklahoma, Tennessee. And so our manufacturing growth since the pandemic has been phenomenal. And so is our job growth this year. As of September and October, we were number one amongst our Midwestern peers in job growth, and I think sixth nationally. I'll also say, just as we think about it, so we're in a really good spot. When I came to DED in 2017, we'd been going through a rough stretch where our state wasn't growing as much as our Midwestern peers. In fact, we ranked dead last amongst our Midwestern peers in terms of GDP growth. That's improved quite a bit. From 2018 to 2023, our average annual growth rate, we're now fourth in the Midwest and 23rd nationally, which is a big improvement from where we were in the 2010s. So that doesn't tell us exactly where we can go, but I think where we can take this is, what can we do to continue growing, to continue leading the pack here in the Midwest and beyond?
The working teams have been mentioned a couple of times already. Just for the listeners, for context, can you go into a little bit more about the working teams? We don't need to get too far into the weeds because we're going to cover them in later episodes, but just kind of a high-level view. How many working teams are there? What are they looking at? What are their kind of individual goals? I'm sure their goals are kind of aligned, but what are the working teams, and kind of just contextual for the listeners?
We have 4 working teams that were developed to help us build our strategic options in our CEDS. Those teams were built based on 4 themes that we had identified and how we want to structure our CEDS and our action items around. And so those 4 themes are business development, talent, innovation, and community infrastructure. So we have our own Lori Becklenberg, who's leading our business development team. We have Christy Davis, who's leading our talent team. Rachel Anderson with eFactory is leading our innovation team. And then Kim Frensdorf is heading up our community innovation team. And those teams, the areas that they're looking to support is everything from business attraction and retention to attracting, training, and retaining skilled workforce, the technology advancements and entrepreneurship, and then infrastructure and community readiness. And so each of those teams are going to cover a variety of topics within each of those different themes.
Gotcha. Okay. Pulling it back just to kind of CEDS in general, because we don't want to get too far into the weeds. We'll be picking apart CEDS in future episodes for those who are really interested in this kind of stuff. But besides giving us a strategy to follow, does CEDS give us any kind of leg up in any other departments? I think we've kind of mentioned with like obtaining federal funds or aligning strategies and all that. But besides just a roadmap, so to speak, to follow, what other kind of leg up or use does the CEDS have?
I think just going back to our goals of making sure that we're able to bring federal funding streams to all Missouri communities, also improving our programs and policies, and then bringing forward bold economic development ideas. So to answer your question, like what will it do? I think I go back to prior strategies that have been developed in Missouri. So in 2011, we had a statewide strategy that was brought forward by the economic development community. And a couple really important things came out of that strategy. Number one, Missouri Works actually came from that 2011 strategy. And there was a recommendation that we have a flexible, unified business development incentive set of programs. Before that point, there was several business development incentive programs that were disparate, hard to follow, and there was a recommendation that they're synthesized and brought together. And so Missouri Works was formed a couple of years later. That's seen really by the economic development community really appreciates Missouri Works. It's our workhorse incentive program. Thousands of jobs go through Missouri Works and are facilitated thanks to Missouri Works and other efforts. So that's an example of success that has come from a prior strategy. I'd also mention Missouri One Start. In that same 2011 strategy, there was a recommendation that we have a branded workforce development program. And they mentioned states like Georgia, and they've got Georgia Quick Start, or Alabama. And those states are known for having very customized, well-branded workforce development entities. And so in 2011, there was a recommendation, let's do something like that here in Missouri. Now, that one didn't happen for a few years. That wasn't until Best in Midwest in 2018. There was another real push for a branded workforce development program. And then through Governor Parsons' executive order in 2019, Missouri One Start was officially founded. And Missouri One Start has been phenomenally successful. Tens of thousands of Missourians have been trained through the program. And we actually rank as a state number 5 in customized training of any state in the United States. And so Missouri One Start's been a huge success. And that started because economic development practitioners and stakeholders came together and they set a vision and a strategy. Here's what we want to achieve as a state.
Yeah, so we're going, here's a roadmap, but the possibility of great things blossoming out of it, like Missouri One Start and Best in the Midwest and all that stuff is possible. Maybe not a focus, maybe not planned for, but the ingredients to make that cookie is there.
Yeah, I think so. And so we've got just tremendous economic development stakeholders throughout the state. We have over 60 folks these are our top economic development leaders who are involved in our working teams right now. And we've gotten a ton of data, a ton of research. And so we're bringing all those ideas forward. And so, yeah, what is next? Where do we want to go as a state from an economic development perspective? So we've done it before. What can we do next?
You've mentioned a few dates there, 2011, 2018, 2019. When we're talking about CEDS, how long-term of a strategy is this? How long do we think that this placemat will be in maybe placemat's not the best term, but just for lack of a better one, how long do we foresee using this roadmap?
Yeah, so CEDS is actually designed as a 5-year planning tool. And so we'll look to be sure that the strategic options within it are things that we can implement and execute over the next 5 years. And, as with any strategic plan as well, I think it's important to remember that they aren't just built and then set on a shelf, right? They can be iterative and you can continue to kind of progress through it and take any kind of changes or modifications as necessary along the way.
I was going to ask, how flexible is it if we're going to say, hey, 5 years here, we're locked in, and you're kind of noting that it is flexible, but just to kind of put it into context, how is it designed so that we can pivot if we need to? I know probably some strategies you need it to play out to see if it's a good one or not, right? But if you're running into issues at like year 3, how do we pivot and change at that point?
So the way a CEDS is designed, again, kind of back to the components of an actual CEDS document, it's important to have a good action plan and then the framework for evaluation. And so that will kind of help us guide our way as we are implementing and being able to monitor, is this working, is this not working? And then we can discuss next steps from there.
This has kind of been talked about too, just how our regions and our partners could utilize the strategy that we make. And sounds like we're making it alongside with them. We're getting their feedback and all that. But how do you guys foresee our CEDS being utilized across our regions? I'm sure I don't know if one region can use it in a very specific way towards what they do, like maybe the agricultural regions can be like, oh, we can implement this in our unique industry, and then the more urban metropolis areas use it in some way. So how do you guys foresee it being versatile in a way that our state, which is very versatile, the variety of industries and whatnot that we have, that they can all use it in a productive way?
The way we're going about developing this and being very intentional in including the input from our stakeholders from all corners of our state, throughout all of our regions and our communities, is really vital to making sure that they see themselves in it and that it aligns with their goals as well, to be sure that we are all kind of rowing in the same direction in terms of efforts and our achievements. So that's the hope, and then the document itself is going to be built around identifying what our strengths are, where we have resource gaps, but also highlighting areas of opportunity for collaboration across regions, across sectors, so that we can really engage them and get them involved in helping move Missouri forward together.
This is kind of similar to a question I've asked previously, but maybe asking it in a little bit different context might bring up more information. Maybe it's the same, but going outside just what we've looked at inside Missouri and then outside of our peer states, I don't know if we've looked beyond that, but are you guys seeing anything across the country when it comes to CEDS that is worth noting? Maybe something that speaks to overall needs to states or indicators of industry sector directions or changes or anything like that?
So we've spoke with a couple of other states who have been working on a statewide CEDS, and the feedback that we've received is really quite positive in how Missouri is going about putting together our statewide CEDS, because other states have noted that they haven't done as good of a job of collaborating with their regional stakeholders, with their partners, their RPCs. They've really kind of commended us whenever we start sharing about how we're going about accomplishing and putting together our CEDS plan in terms of the intentionality behind getting stakeholder engagement and feedback throughout this entire process. And so that, I think that's been really kind of rewarding in a sense to know that we're planning this in the right direction and that this can be really powerful and beneficial for Missouri.
And Eric, if I can just add on to that, I think that's the power of our model, which Danielle and her team and Stephan Heron are really focused on doing, is every step of the way working with our regional planning commission partners, local economic developers, understanding what they want. So I think the idea is ensuring this doesn't sit on a shelf, is making sure at the local level in Kennett, Missouri, they care about the CEDS, up in St. Joseph or Carrollton, or, pick your part of St. Louis, Kansas City, Columbia, pick your part of Missouri, Rolla, the universities, industries, they care about our statewide economic development strategy because they were a part of it. And that buy-in, the goal is to make sure that buy-in is there so that as we get down the process, we've got a group of committed stakeholders who are saying, we want to drive this forward. This is ours. This isn't the state of Missouri's. This is ours. We all want to have that ownership.
So what I'm hearing is there was no need for Missouri to look elsewhere. Everyone should be looking at Missouri because we're nailing it.
That's right, Eric.
Okay.
Absolutely.
Joking aside, you said something there, Paul, that kind of triggered a question, is we don't want it to sit on a shelf. How do we ensure that doesn't happen? I'm sure having buy-in and everyone having a voice to it and all that. So how do we not allow it sit on a shelf? And a follow-up question to that is, if it does happen to just sit on a shelf, what does that mean?
I think that's why the process is really important. I think by starting off with understanding the facts, doing a peer state comparison, looking at our industry clusters, looking at the skills, the industry, understanding our economy in and out, we've got to start there. And that's stakeholder engagement. And so I think our working team approach is really good. We've got 60 plus of our top economic development leaders in the state who are helping bring forward their ideas. These are folks who've got really good economic development ideas in their respective expertise areas. We want to make sure that as time goes by and then these loose ideas become more specific strategies and tactics, that those folks are saying, yeah, we need to do this in order to move Missouri forward. And so I think that's the key, is just making sure we've got stakeholder buy-in at the local level, the regional, state. Everyone's got to say, we believe in this as a state. This will move us forward. I think that's the key to it, not sitting on the shelf.
In terms of what DED does, the programs and tax incentives and all of that we provide for businesses and communities, is this going to pivot how any of that functions? Are we going to be looking at Missouri Works, for the example, as we were talking about earlier? Do we see areas where we can make that stronger and better? Do we see areas where we can add a new program or maybe take ones away that we're like, oh, these aren't actually fitting the bill anymore? Are we seeing any of that at the moment?
Those are really great questions. And part of, one of our goals that Paul's already outlined is being able to really update or enhance our existing policies and programs. And so part of the conversations within those working teams is to discuss, are the programs, are the incentives that Missouri has in place currently effective? Are they doing what they were intended to do? Because if not, then the working teams can look to propose changes, modifications, or new programs and incentives altogether. And so going back to our goals, like we are starting this out with the objective of, hey, let's identify, do we have opportunities to improve our existing policies and programs or promote new, bold economic ideas and put those on the table. And so any idea, small or blue sky, at this point in time in our research and our planning phase is on the table. So it's possible that some of those things will come out of this.
Okay, great. Some good stuff to dive into future episodes with our working teams. Just speaking about CEDS, the future, no one has a crystal ball, lots of work on the table still. And in this moment, it's probably hard to really pinpoint what the future of the CEDS looks like. But based on what you guys have looked at so far, the tour that took place, the feedback, the data and all of that stuff, what does it look like to you guys?
So it is hard to know in the moment what the future looks like. Some things that I think we do know, right, are that those strategic ideas and the strategies themselves are going to be designed around those 4 key themes: business development, innovation, talent, and community infrastructure. Within those 4 themes and the strategies that are going to move forward, as Paul has said, and as we continue to really prioritize, we look for all communities to be able to see themselves within this. I think that this will be something that anybody, as a result of implementing the CEDS, are going to be able to find some kind of economic growth or enhancement in the future of the state's economy. And most importantly, it's just going to ultimately help Missourians prosper.
So I'm sure our partners, EDA, economic developers, all of those people probably giddy with excitement with CEDS, or so we hope. But what would the average Missouri citizen take away from this? Should they care about a CEDS? How does a CEDS impact them if it does? Beyond, what local economic developers would do. I guess there's a trickle-down effect. They use this strategy plan to get funding, to make more jobs, and then that helps their citizens. But if an average citizen is listening to this, what should they take away from it?
I think one thing I'd like to emphasize is economies are regional. So for local Missouri citizens, I think we are not at the state level saying this is the strategy for the state of Missouri and taking a top-down state-centric approach. The state does play a role, and so we take that seriously, but we start off by understanding our regional economies and by partnering with the Regional Planning Commission. So it's really important that everyday Missouri citizens are working with their local economic developers, working with their local regional planning commissions and providing input on, whether it's housing or childcare issues they're seeing, other workforce issues. We need to make sure that Missourians at the local level are participating. And what I hope everyone sees is the state, DED, is really listening to those local and regional concerns first before suggesting any sort of statewide strategies.
So I'm sure we could talk about CEDS all day. And I know you guys love CEDS, and we probably would like to do that all day long. I'm out of CEDS questions. We're going to have other episodes that dive into more nooks and crannies when it comes to CEDS. But just high level, is there anything else that we should cover that we didn't, that you think listeners might want to know about?
I would just like to say, in the past, Missouri economic development stakeholders have come together to put forward good ideas that have turned into really important programs and policies and have put Missouri on the map. I think Missouri One Start is one of those examples. We've got a top 5 workforce development entity in Missouri One Start. So I think we can do something similar this go around as well.
Well, guys, I really appreciate you guys sitting down and giving all this great information. I'm hoping whoever is listening has got a better understanding of CEDS, and hopefully they're encouraged to listen to more, because more is coming. And this is a kind of a big thing for DED, and hopefully it leads to big things in Missouri when it comes to economic development. So thanks for sitting down and giving us all this information.
Thanks, Eric.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Inside EcoDevo. We have great episodes coming your way every 2 weeks, so be sure to subscribe. Also, we want to hear from you, our listeners. Tell us what economic development topics you want to hear more about. This helps us fulfill our motto of helping Missourians prosper by bringing content to our listeners that they want to hear. Leave a comment on an episode or send an email to ded.communications@ded.mo.gov and stay tuned for more Inside EcoDevo.